You may have already seen the video that I posted on Who Killed Bruce Lee, martial arts actor and martial artist. But here is an even more, for lack of a better word or expression, curious than not question into the death of someone, and that is none other than the son of Bruce Lee. Who killed Brandon Bruce Lee? Or was his death the result of an accident? What do you think? Now, when I'm done, which is brief, let me know what you think then as well. I'm just going to throw out a couple of things. In the 60s and the 70s, there was staunch racism in America. I'm not beating up on anyone. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm stating facts and historical facts. There was a dissension between blacks and whites in America. Might I add, inclusive was also how Asians were perceived by the Western world. They were seen as slant eyes, gooks, yellow boys of men. They were disregarded, other than the things that benefited America, other than the things that benefited the West. They were disregarded, maybe not to the degree that blacks were, who were born for the most part in this country, America. But Asians were not treated very nice or kind during the 60s and 70s as well. Not only was the fact that a black and white couple were together become frowned on by mainstream white society, it was not okay for Asians to marry whites during that time as well. And guess what? Bruce Lee was one of those. He not only became very popularized in his own country and in American culture later on, but he married a Caucasian female, Linda Lee Cadwell now. At the time, it was Linda Emery. That was frowned upon during that time. You see, during that time, as I forestated, racism was rampant in America. Did blacks serve in the military? Yes, they did. All branches during the 60s and the 70s. But it does not necessarily mean that they were popular in any other respect as it related to white society and ideologies. There's always been that element of white supremacist thinking. I'm not talking about all whites. I'm talking about the infrastructure, the elite white supremacist structure. Now, with that said, Bruce Lee was never supposed to be an American martial arts hero. Why? He wasn't white. Do you honestly think there would have ever been a black martial arts hero during the time that Bruce Lee lived? Why? Because he was black. Don't forget and become too far removed from what I said earlier about racism. Blacks were frowned upon during the 60s and 70s, and we can tell that by the riots and the civil rights riots with Dr. King and so forth, Malcolm X, and many others. But Asians also, to a lesser degree, but they were still frowned upon by white mainstream society. So, when Bruce Lee left Hong Kong, when he came to America, made a connection with Linda Lee later, at first Linda Emery, they united, became married and had children. That was not the norm for white society. But I believe that he was one of the instruments to break that barrier of race between the East and the West. He took on black students and white students as well as Asian. And on top of that, he became so popular as a martial artist because of his charisma and his stage presence and his talent as a martial artist. So, an Asian couldn't be the hero of America. So I believe that Bruce Lee was hated by a segment of our society because they would have wanted a white hero in America. Not an Asian, not a black, but a white hero. And I believe that that is why they pushed Chuck Norris so hard when Bruce Lee chose him to stand opposite him in Return of the Dragon. And the rest is history. And kudos to Chuck Norris. But he gained his stardom not from any pure talent that he had of his own, just because he was in the right place at the right time with the right person, the one whom we know as Bruce Lee. Fast forward, early 90s, his son, Brandon Bruce Lee, on the set of a movie called The Crow. He was fatally wounded by what was supposed to be a prop gun. And he was hit with, I guess, what can be deemed as a bullet or a fragment of a bullet, so much so in the right place where it took and cost him his life. They said it was an accident. What do you say? I saw an interview where Brandon said that he wasn't trying to be like his father. He was an actor. Brandon, that is. He was saying that he was an actor expressing himself through acting, and he didn't want to be looked at as his father, just as an actor in his own and by his own right. I respected that. But I don't think that certain ones in the industry in America, the film industry that is, and even the martial arts industry, saw it through Brandon's eyes that way. I believe that they saw Brandon Lee as a threat to white society. And those people that frowned upon Bruce Lee frowned also upon Brandon, because Brandon, I believe, would have been the next best thing to his father, just by virtue of the fact that he was the only boy. He was being trained by Bruce Lee's students during that time. He had already launched an acting career and he was well on his way. How is it that you can die on the set of a film in the 90s? We know we're in the 2000s now, but aren't you intelligent enough? Aren't you sophisticated enough in the movie industry during that time, when you compare or contrast Bruce Lee's movies in the 70s to 20 something years later? You would think that things would have been more professionally done, safety even more enhanced during the 90s, where you can make an accident and put a real bullet in a prop gun or something else like a bullet. Whatever the case was, at the end of the day, he died at the hands of what was supposed to be a prop. That was the method. An apology didn't bring him back. What a coincidence that Bruce Lee died 73, and 20 years later his son dies by a prop on the set of a movie. What could be stood to gain from that, from someone? Well, Bruce Lee was already deemed as the greatest martial artist of his time in the 70s, and his offspring, his son, by no admission of his own, was actually heading that same direction. Someone didn't want that to happen. I didn't personify anyone, but I said someone did not want that to happen. I believe that Bruce Lee died by working himself to death, as I said in the other video that I did. And I don't believe that Brandon's death was accidental. I don't. I've never believed that it was accidental. And I still don't believe that it was accidental. And I will never believe that it was accidental. I believe that someone stopped Brandon early in his life, at the age of 28, from achieving the same success that his father had garnered during his short life at the age of 32. That's what I believe. Now, I wasn't a fly on the wall. I wasn't there. But I have been following Bruce Lee's life as long as I knew about Bruce Lee as a child, reading his books, his manuals, his manuscripts, watching him on film, just studying the man. He was a powerful influence in and out of martial arts. And Brandon, even though he said that was not his intention to be like his father, I believe that other people saw that he probably was going to be like his father. Even though he had an American Caucasian mother and an Asian father, they still saw him as not Caucasian. They saw him as Asian. And remember what I said earlier about the issue of racism in America in relationship to whites and blacks and whites and Asians during that time. They didn't want Brandon to be another Bruce Lee. They were not ready to keep his legacy alive that way. And it threatened, indirectly, other people in the industry who were white martial artists and actors, action film stars. It threatened them. to see what Brandon Lee could have possibly become. That was it. And that was all. Please be kind when you're here. Let me know what you think of this particular subject. Do you think Brandon Lee was killed intentionally? Or was it actually an accident, as they said it was back in the early 90s? Am I rehashing something? I have the ability to do that because I'm doing it right now. You don't have to watch it. You don't have to listen to it. But if you choose to do so, give your honest viewpoint. Please, that's all I ask. If you like my videos, if you find them interesting and of value, please share and subscribe if you desire. And also, I'm going through the COVID crisis with my business. I've said that in a previous video. For those of you that would like to donate to my channel to help my physical brick and mortar business and my channel, you will find the donation venues and methods beneath this video. Take care of yourself and yours, and may the Almighty Yahweh God continue to bless you and yours. He loves you, and Brother Teacher loves you as well. Thank you for watching. So long.